be better than talking shit. I remember one time I tried to do that and they definitely could hear us. We were just like talking. Whoops. You look.
It'd be like that sometimes. Sorry. I just told somebody, it's like, dude, I don't bring your kid over here because I'll be cussing, and I'm not. I mean, I could filter, but I don't want to, so no. Set a timer.
So right now we are live, and we are just showing the splash.
Nice. Turn my volume down just so I can look.
Yeah, you're a little bit loud. Gathering viewers at 11 o'clock. Alrighty. Also, the other reason why this show has to be only an hour is because I have an upset stomach. I'm gonna be so distracted.
No. That's a fucked up way to start your day.
I agree. I'm a mess right now. I'm gonna be a mess behind the scenes, but no one's gonna be able to tell unless they heard me just now.
Well, life be lifing, so it's okay. We got this. We got it. And we are. Let's share this right now.
Share the stream. Alrighty, it's 11, so I'm gonna reveal us and turn the audio on. Boop, 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 boop. Greetings. Hold on. Let me turn on all the mics. It's taking a long time for some reason. Alright. So it should be all the mics. I see the meter moving as I'm speaking. So I assume that means that people can hear us. But if you cannot hear us, please say so. Otherwise, we'll just be up here talking. And it'll be really awkward. So please let us know if it's just like moving lips and no sound before we get started. I feel like every time we do it,
we want you to hear us.
Every time it's me and you, I just like giggle the whole time. The whole time. I can't help it.
I apologize. I don't. Actually, I don't. I don't.
This is serious. This is a serious topic. But
it really is. Sometimes you gotta latch keep from crying because goddamn.
It's some bullshit. It's some bullshit being a colonized woman in this society. And we're gonna talk about it. But greetings, everybody. We're just waiting for a few more folks to join us. So we have a nice sized audience before we just start talking. But thanks so much for tuning in. Please share the stream wherever you're watching it. If you're on Facebook, share it to your Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, retweet that shit. If you're on YouTube, put it on your Facebook or tweet it. But please share this show to help us build our audience. We appreciate you.
Very, very much. Good morning.
Good morning. Did you say good morrow? Good morrow. Good morrow.
You do that shit. You say that shit.
I like it. I'm gonna start saying good morrow. Shakespearean style. Good morrow. Sweet. I see Eduardo, the homie Eduardo in San Antonio, just shared the feed right after we asked. Right after we asked.
Good morning, Eduardo. You're amazing.
Yes. Yes. Okay, so give us a few more minutes as we gather more folks in the audience. I see it climbing steadily. So at 11:05, let's get started.
I love it.
So 3 minutes. Look at all the people sharing. Maggie just shared. Oh no, Maggie liked it. Maggie, share the video.
Good morning, Maggie. Would you like to share our video?
Please. Share it. Building Power for Black New Mexico just started a watch party. Thank you, comrades. Yes.
Come on now. Come on, Building Power for Black NM. Look at you. Look at you.
That's how we do solidarity here in occupied Tiwa territory. We show up for each other. Thank you so much. Let me share this on the APIP International page because it's that serious. 1 second.
No worries.
Hi, everybody. We're going to get started in 2 minutes. We're just waiting for y'all to gather in. We understand that time is a colonial construct, and so you might be a little bit late. And so we're just waiting for y'all to join us before we jump right in 2 minutes. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It's good to see you. Please keep sharing. So far, no one has said that they can't hear us, so I assume it's fine. Otherwise, we're just like kikiing, just like laughing in silence, and they're not saying anything. That'd be messed up.
You know, we really have to question your mothers at that point. Like, this is goofy as hell, not saying nothing, just lips moving, hearing nothing. So, don't have us out there looking foolish. Don't do that. That's not nice.
It's not comradely. It's not. Alright, I see Andrew in YouTube comments. Greetings, Andrew.
Andrew!
I assume that means people can hear us. No one's saying otherwise. I have such paranoia about this now. Okay.
We're not out here looking ridiculous.
We look great. Whether or not people can hear us, we look awesome. Look at this.
I would say, I'm like, what the hell is this lipstick on? No. It will interfere with my swearing and my ability to drink on camera, so no.
Comrade Monica is reporting that we are audible. Your audio is a little bit muffled, so just make sure you can see. Yes, Jay is also saying on Facebook they can hear us. Thank you, Jay. Dope. Alright, it's 11:05. Let's motherfucking do this.
Woo!
This will be a show full of a lot of swearing because both me and Demetria have potty mouths. That's just how it is. We're going to do our best to convey the information as well as the swearing. Greetings. We are All African People's Revolutionary Party, New Mexico chapter. And this is our weekly show, Weekly Pan-African News Live. We do this every single Thursday morning at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. We started the show at the beginning of the pandemic because we noticed that a lot of the information coming from the tippity top, from the CDC, from the U.S. president, was like straight up bullshit. And thousands of African and indigenous and colonized people were being drastically affected by the mishandling of the pandemic in the U.S. and by the misinformation around the pandemic in the U.S. And so we were like, why don't we create a platform where we could disseminate correct information about this thing that's killing our people? Because clearly the U.S. government's not going to do it. So that's how this was born. And also because, you know, it's very, very difficult to get news about Africa and African people from mainstream sources that's not super racist. And so we wanted to give y'all that analysis and those updates from a revolutionary Pan-African perspective because we are a revolutionary Pan-African political party based in Africa. So this is our show, Weekly Pan-African News Live. My name is Onya Sanwu. This is my lovely co-host, Demetria. Greetings. Also in New Mexico chapter. And we are reporting to y'all live from occupied Tiwa territory, also known as Albuquerque, but we always say occupied Tiwa territory because this is Tiwa land, period. It never stopped being Tiwa land. It will never stop being Tiwa land. The Tiwa people are still here, and they're going to get their land back, just like we're going to get Africa back. So we always start off by saying, like, this is our land, point blank, period. United States does not have a right to exist. The other thing that we always do at the beginning of every show is we want to call in an African ancestor. And why do we do that? We do that because we, as revolutionary African women, as revolutionary Pan-Africanists, as members of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, understand that we are not just like babes out in the woods, We are, the modern day descendants of a national liberation struggle, an anti-colonial struggle that has been waged for 5 centuries and counting. The only reason we are here today to do this work is because of the people that came before us. It's because many, many African people organized, fought, and sacrificed to create the space for us to do this work. And so we would be remiss we would be assholes if we did not acknowledge the folks that came before us, the folks that did this work, the folks that made it possible for us to be talking to you today. So every single show, we acknowledge the land that we're on, and we call in an ancestor. So the ancestor we're calling in today is Mary McLeod Bethune. Mary McLeod Bethune, whose birthday is actually tomorrow, but she was a revolutionary African woman. She was a legendary educator and activist. She was born in Maysville, South Carolina, and you might already know her name. Like, you probably recognize the name Bethune because she was a founding member of one of the first HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities in the United States, Bethune-Cookman University. She helped found that school in 1904 in Daytona Beach. And so we just want to lift her up today, lift up the very long history of African people creating spaces for our people to develop themselves politically and educationally within a society that really, really worked hard to make it so we couldn't do that. And so we want to honor her today on the show as the ancestor we're calling in and the ancestor we want to have in the space with us as we talk to y'all today. But as we said at the top of the show, this is a very, very serious topic that we're going to be discussing this week for the political education portion of the show. We always do, like, you cannot come to an APRP event, whether it is virtual or in real life, without having some aspect of political education, because we understand as revolutionaries that in order to, like, wage battle against an enemy, you first have to understand the enemy and you have to understand how they work. And so that's the purpose of political education, is to raise our people's consciousness about what is being done to us, about why it's happening, about who's doing it, and about what we can do to stop it. And so today, for the PE segment of the show, we're going to be talking about capitalist violence against African and colonized women. African and colonized women within this backward-ass society are not safe. They are not safe when dealing with the police. We are not safe even when enlisted in the U.S. military. We are not safe when, like, walking down the street living our lives. And so we want to talk about why that is, and we're going to use two specific cases to get into this discussion. Breonna Taylor, who was an African woman murdered in her sleep by police in Louisville. And we're also going to be talking about Vanessa Guillen, who was a Chicano woman who was enlisted in the U.S. military, who was murdered by her fellow troops for being a colonized woman. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Demetria to get us into this topic.
All the smiles are gone. So Breonna Taylor was 26 years old. She was in her home, asleep, when the police executed a no-knock raid, broke down her door, or not broke down her door. Her boyfriend attempted to defend them, and the police opened fire, as they are known to do, killed this woman, okay? Killed her. She laid there. The police never bothered to render aid to her. She laid there for 6 minutes. 6 minutes. They didn't say, hey girl, you good? You need to check this person out. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And their excuse is that her boyfriend fired a single shot. One shot in defense of their home. The medical examiner said that even if she were shot in the ER, she would not have survived. She would have died of her injuries. Her injuries were fatal, and there was no way to save her. Even still, for 6 minutes, the police did nothing. They did absolutely nothing to render any sort of aid to her, and they are still on their job. This was a botched raid. We've talked about it before. I know we have. This was a botched raid because the person they were looking for was already in their custody. So if you're going to knock at someone's door after midnight, how do you not know that the person you are looking for is already in your custody? What are you doing? They said that the person they were looking for was an ex of Breonna's who they believe to be selling drugs. And I don't know anyone who's ever mailed drugs to themselves. I don't think that's a thing. But I'm just a person in society. Breonna Taylor laid in her house, died. Her mother came to look for her. As a mother, that's what you do. That's to show up for your kids. And her mother was lied to. Said, oh yeah, we took her to the hospital. Oh, she's over here. And that woman was still in her home. That is psychological abuse. That is emotional torture. The only officer to be fired, for her death because he wantonly and blindly shot into the home because he shot through a curtained glass door. So you just fucking willy-nilly firing bullets? You just willy-nilly shooting into someone's home? Wantonly and blindly shooting into the home and showing extreme indifference for the value of human life. No fucking joke. Thank you, please. But this is common because women are often the target of this kind of abuse, and they're used as a way to get to their ex-partners, to their current partners. We are often abused in that way. It's like, oh, we'll take your kids from you, or we'll make it so that you can't earn a living. Women always get that sort of abuse from police, from the state, actually, not even the police, it's state violence. We're targets of that sort of state violence, and it's the kind of psychological abuse and warfare that we often get as colonized African women.
For sure. Like, I feel like it's super important to reinforce that, like, what happened to Breonna Taylor is an example of something that happens, like, across, like, all sectors of capitalist settler colonial society. Like, African women, like, from the moment that we were brought here, when we were kidnapped from Africa, when we were brought here, when we were literally treated as, like, domesticated creatures that were just existing to either exploit our labor or to produce new Africans whose labor could be exploited. Like, from the very beginning, our humanity has not been respected on this land. And no matter how, you know, the colonizer state moved to, like, create so-called rights for us, to create space for us, because now we have, you know, African female cops. We got an African fucking cop running for fucking president. That, oh God. Anyway, so we have all this space that's been created for us within this system. And yet, when it comes to, like, our basic lives, when it comes to protection for our bodies and for our children, like, it just doesn't exist. There's the example of Breonna Taylor, but there's also the example of Corinne Gaines. Corinne Gaines, who was being served, I believe, like, a traffic ticket by police in Maryland, who they came to her door, they, like, broke in, they, like, assaulted her with weapons, and when she tried to protect herself and her home and her child, they murdered her. And so this is over a traffic ticket. So, like, this dehumanization and criminalization of African women, like, it's hundreds of years old within this particular society, and we have to understand that it's, like, specifically about how this society views us. Like, it doesn't really actually see us as women. It sees us as, like, threats. It sees us as, like, either we're, like, producing children that are threats to, like, the sanctity of the fucking capitalist state, and we're also ourselves considered to be subhuman threats. And so that's why these people can break into this woman's house in the middle of the night and shoot at them in the dark. And her partner, her man, was the only person in that situation that was trying to stand up for her, that was trying to protect her. And so he fires a shot at people into breaking into his house in an attempt to protect her. And in response, the police murder her in her bed and then arrest him while her corpse is laying beside him. So this is just, like, an example, like, the punishment for existing as an African woman, and also the punishment for attempting to protect an African woman, is death within the society.
And it's been that way since America's inception. Your women are not yours. Women, your bodies are not yours. We don't recognize your humanity. We don't recognize your right to just exist, live, and be. And we're going to execute violence to you, on you, at every possible turn.
And it's also not just us, right? Because, like, when we were talking about doing this show, like, we were talking about how, you know, there's, like, missing and murdered Indigenous women. There's, like, a whole movement around Indigenous women, Native women who have, like, disappeared from their communities, who are very often victims of violence, how this is, like, an epidemic for this particular community. It's the same situation for Chicano women. It's the same situation for immigrant women, migrant women from Central and South America. Like, colonized women within the United States, within, like, Western Empire, are not safe from like the very beginning when, you know, European powers were like conquering this land, were like stealing it and like committing genocide. We were the targets. Our children, our communities, our lands were targeted for violence in order to destroy our societies. And so from the very beginning of the U.S. as an entity, like violence against women has been a strategy of expansion. And so I feel like we're living right now with the modern day consequences of that strategy, where indigenous women go missing and murdered, African women and girls go missing and murdered. Like we talked about Toyin Salau a couple of times on the show. Precisely what happened to Toyin Salau is something that every single African girl coming up in the United States has to deal with, like across the board. Like African girls go missing and no one cares. It's not news. We're blamed for it. It happens in city after city after city. So the same shit's happening to us. The same shit's happening to the migrant women that are being forced to like pick the food that people eat, and at the same time as they're picking this food, they're being exploited by the men that own these farms, being like sexually exploited, being abused by the men that own these farms. So there's like this pattern of violence against African, indigenous, Chicano, Latinx, colonized women as the foundation of this society.
Yeah. What this society was built on. God.
It just makes you mad. It makes you like disgusted because we are all very often like sexualized and criminalized in such a way where abuse that's done to us is being framed as our fault. Like that is extremely common for African women and girls. Like the whole concept of like the fast tail girl, where you're like a little kid and like a dude like hitting on you is somehow your fault. Like that's like a very, very common thing within the African community or within like colonized communities. So, but the other thing I want to talk about is that even within these structures created ostensibly to protect people like the police, but also like the military, women are not protected. Colonized women are still exposed to this kind of abuse. And a very, very clear example of this is the example of Vanessa Guillen. So do you want to talk about that, Demetria?
This makes me mad because my mother's a veteran. So the U.S. military has zero infrastructure to protect women in the military, and that is by design. It's not a flaw. The military is designed to not protect women from sexual, physical, emotional, mental abuse at all. That is by design. Again, Vanessa Guillen, I feel like I script her name every time. She was murdered on base. She was murdered at Fort Hood in the armory. She was never missing. I think that's something that we really need to make clear. She was never missing. She was murdered on base. She was murdered at a United States military base. And the people in charge tried to fucking cover it up. They knew what happened to her. They knew her family was looking for her. They knew it, and they did nothing. Oh, let's stop this place. And Fort Hood is notorious for having things happen on their base and sweeping it under the rug. They're notorious for having things happen on their base and not saying anything. The military is notorious for having women be murdered, sexually assaulted, and saying nothing. And then these women are put out of the military.
Yep.
Because men fully understand what rape does to a woman, and then they put these systems in place to mark these women as damaged and broken. You fucking damaged and broken, you bastard. And then they're cast aside and left with no support and no recourse, and fuck this place.
And the exact same thing that's happening to African and colonized women within the U.S. military is precisely what the U.S. military does when it travels around the entire world. Like right now, as we speak, there are mass people's movements in Japan, in the Philippines, in Central and South America to get the U.S. military bases off of that land. Why? Because whenever the U.S. military opens up a base on someone else's land, they bring a wave of motherfucking men that commit extreme violence against the indigenous women of these areas, and they do so with impunity. Because oftentimes when the U.S. military opens up a base they create a deal with the hosting nation where they're like, okay, you can't prosecute our soldiers. We're going to prosecute our soldiers. But what that actually means is exactly what Demetria just explained, where these soldiers commit violence, because that is how the U.S. military has always been set up. That is how U.S. military power has always functioned, by deliberately targeting women, children, elders, like by deliberately targeting the most vulnerable segments of a population. So when the U.S. military sets up and this begins to happen, the U.S. military never has any intention of actually holding anyone accountable. They are actually intending for it to be treated with impunity. They are actually intending to be able to send out these soldiers into these communities to straight up murder and rape women and have them come back and just go about their business, get sent somewhere else. So, like, precisely what's happening to people like Vanessa Guillen, precisely what's happening to countless African and colonized women within the U.S. military, the U.S. military is doing externally all around the world on purpose and has done so for hundreds of years.
Since this country's inception, that our bodies have been used as currency for forever, and this place is set up to protect angry, violent European men. Yep. It's really what it's good for. That's it.
People are like shocked when Trump won the U.S. election. I remember people were like, it's not, when he was running, people were like, it's not possible. When like the grab him by the pussy comments came out, people were like, he's done. And I was like watching that and I was like, no, the hell he's not. No, he is not. No, because he is precisely the kind of man, the kind of European man, the kind of wealthy European man that is the product of this country. Like, he is the perfect representative of the United States. He is a wealthy, powerful, racist rapist. He is the perfect president. Like, the very first U.S. presidents, the motherfucking founding fathers, all engaged in open acts of rape of African women and children. Thomas Jefferson is on the money, and that man raped an African child for decades. So, Donald Trump is perfect. For me, he's the perfect representative of this country. He is the perfect representative of like the particular type of rape culture and patriarchy that exists in this country. When folks were shocked that he got elected, I was like, you do not understand where you live, period. Because to me, like, this is inevitable. That was inevitable. Of course they have an open rapist as president. And now the dude that's running against him is also a rapist. That shit is hilarious to me. Because it, again, shows you how fucked up this country is at the core. How, like, deeply messed up the United States is. The motherfucking woman, and it's not just one woman, there's, like, multiple allegations, like, credible allegations of abuse against Joe Biden. But the one in particular that's the most famous, this woman, she told the janitor, she told her mama, she told, like, someone across the hall, like, she told person after person, immediately after it happened, the same motherfucking story. So it's very clear to me that she is telling the truth. Like, it's very clear to me she's telling the truth. If all these people are saying, like, she told me the exact same thing. But people who definitely know better, especially after Me Too, are trying to act like somehow this man is better than Trump. I'm like, no. They seem the same to me. Like, he is an extremely wealthy, openly racist, like, the man organized against school desegregation. Joe Biden organized against school desegregation. A man who has openly, like, there's video upon video of this man putting his hands on visibly uncomfortable women and girls. Yep. And people are trying to tell me that this man is going to save me from the other rapist European. I'm like, y'all are out of your mind. You are out of your mind. Like, this place has confused you. Because, yeah. Woo! Anyway. So it's just like...
And it's just so amazing because it's like, oh no, well, I mean, he raped adult women, not children. Bitch, shut up! Shut the fuck up! Like, this is the bad place, guys, folks, people. This is the fucking bad place.
And that's like what the United States does to people. Like we just explained, the police don't protect women. Like within, externally and internally, the police victimize colonized women. Internally, externally, the U.S. military victimizes colonized women. Internally and externally, like all aspects of the U.S., local, and federal government victimize colonized women by criminalizing us, by taking away our kids, by forcing us into poverty and then blaming us for it. So at every level of this society, African and colonized women are victimized by design. And then people are taught that the only way we can save ourselves is by leaning on like this European rapist or that like the blue one or the red one. Like we're taught that their only way out, our only way of saving ourselves is to invest more in the system that was built on our abuse, that was built on our rape, and it's like an extremely sick cycle. And that's why I'm very, very grateful for the All African People's Revolutionary Party and the All African Women's Revolutionary Union for saying that no, your savior, your salvation is not in the hands of fucking Joe Biden. Joe rapist ass Biden. Joe, I don't want to desegregate schools Biden. No, my liberation is not in that man's hands. My liberation is in my own hands. My liberation is in Demetria's hands. My liberation is in Monica's hands. African and colonized women have all the capacity we need to liberate ourselves. We just need to be organized, and we need to have it pointed in a revolutionary direction. But if our salvation is supposed to be like some blue-colored rapist, that's a motherfucking joke to me. So I'm just very, very grateful for this space, and also for you, Demetria, because we know better. We know better. We know better than to depend on any structure of this system, which, again, from the very beginning, was built on raping and abusing and murdering us in order to steal our land, in order to exploit our people. We know better than to depend on any part of the system to save us. We're going to save ourselves.
Exactly.
Cool. So that was the P section. Once again, this show has to be exactly 1 hour because I have to go to work. So we're going to keep it moving, but we do see your comments. Andrew's in the comments saying, every single African woman I know who has talked to me about their experience in the U.S. military explained that they had been sexually assaulted in the military. That's also true for me. That's true for every woman I know in the military. Either they were raped or abused, or they just had like intense verbal sexual harassment for their entire military career, no matter how high they made it up. Extremely common. What's up?
Because you never class out. You're never ever going to class out of that kind of treatment in this system, ever.
Like rape and abuse of women and girls is like a U.S. military strategy, and it has been since the beginning of the United States. So obviously within the U.S. military, it's not going to stop. Monica saying the military does not protect women from sexual harassment or sexual assault. Yes, they knew it and they tried to cover it up, and the community kept elevating her to be found, talking about Vanessa Guillen, like over and over again in these cases where colonized women, African women, are being abused and murdered, oftentimes in the U.S. military. It's their families who refuse to let it go that leads to justice being found, or at least the truth surfacing. In every single case, the U.S. military refuses to look into the situation. Like there's the example of the African woman. I'm sorry, I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but they said she had committed suicide. What's her name?
I remember her last name is Johnson.
Johnson, yeah. So they said she had committed suicide. They found her bloody as hell in someone else's tent, a contractor's tent. Her genitals on base. So also content warning, because I'm going to give the details of the case, and it's like pretty intense. So content warning for details of a sexual assault against an African woman. But they found her genitals partially burned off from some kind of acid. The angle, they said she had shot herself, but she was like shot in the back of the head or something crazy with a rifle. And she was found in someone else's tent on base, like Dimitri just said. And with all that stuff, like burned off genitals, shot in the back of the head, in someone else's tent, they were like, she committed suicide. And they sent her body back home to her family without giving any other details about what happened to her. And her family opened the casket and they were like, what the hell happened to her body? And that's the only reason why that case did not die right there with the U.S. military closing it. Her family refused to accept the story, refused to accept that she had killed herself, and demanded independent investigations. And those demands continue to this day. But that is typical. That is typical when colonized women, African women, suffer violence within the U.S. military. It is their families pushing for justice that surfaces the truth, because in every single case, the U.S. military attempts to hide it. So, yeah.
I think it's important to remember that it's the family pushing for justice, but not necessarily receiving it, because no one is ever held accountable for these actions. It's their families that are calling out, saying, hey, we don't accept this, but nothing ever happens to the perpetrators of the violence against these women, at every turn. For indigenous women who just go missing off the face of the earth, no one is ever held accountable for that.
Yeah. And Monica just shared the name of that comrade, the name of the African woman who the U.S. military claimed killed herself, who we know did not kill herself, was Lavina Johnson. So, like, Vanessa Guillen was the latest in a long, long line of African, Chicano, indigenous women who have been victimized by the U.S., have been victimized by the U.S. military, whose families have had to engage in fights for justice. And, like, we're going to talk about this more in next week's show, but, like, there are very, very important reasons why African, indigenous, Chicano, colonized women should not join the U.S. military point blank. Should not. Because you're going to suffer violence against your body, but you're also going to visit violence against other colonized women's bodies within that institution. So we have no business being in the U.S. military. We're going to talk about that in more detail next week, but just wanted to put that out there that, like, these families are losing their daughters. Like, Lavina Johnson was 19 years old. Vanessa Guillen, I believe, was like 19 years old. Like, losing their young ass daughters, like sacrificing them to the empire. And the empire is just like looking back with a blank ass face being like, what are you going to do about it? We took her from you and we're going to hide it in your face. So we have no business. We have no business in that institution, especially considering the history of the U.S. using violence against our bodies, against the bodies of African, indigenous, and colonized women as a specific strategy to expand this empire. We have no business in the U.S. military whatsoever, and we'll go into that in more detail next week. But anyway, yeah, so Monica's just giving more details about Lavina Johnson. They told her family not to open the casket. They sent her body back to her family mutilated, and they told them not to look at it. Man, fuck the United States. And let's see, her dad was in the military too. Her sister knew something was wrong and opened the casket. Her genitals were even removed. She was brutally murdered, and it was ruled a suicide. So, again,
as a woman with daughters, things like this really hit. It's like, fuck this thing. Because as a mom of daughters, I can't imagine needing to get to my kid, not being able to get to my kid because the people who are supposed to protect them are complicit in fucking crime.
And then lie right to your face.
Yep. If it all burns, it's okay. Burn this to the ground. We gotta keep 2 hours. We gotta keep pushing.
Cool. So next up, COVID-19 updates. All you, Demetria.
Yes. So COVID's still a thing. It's coronavirus is real. COVID-19 is real, and it's still a thing. We are still in the midst of a global pandemic. It hasn't went nowhere. The only thing that has changed is the date and the numbers. That's it. So you need to wear your mask. Wear your mask. Wear your mask. Do you need a mask? The AAPRP can hook you up with a mask.
We got you.
Wear your mask. Wash your hands. Stay out of crowds. Stay out of crowds. Stay out of crowds. Just because things are open does not mean you need to go. Just because things are open does not mean it is safe. Specifically in the United States, they're willing to sacrifice our bodies and our lives for their economy. Fucking stupid. Absolutely not. Corona's still a thing. We need to be safe out here, everybody. There are hundreds of scientists who are pushing the WHO, the World Health Organization, to say that COVID is airborne. The WHO is resistant. What we know about the WHO is that they are reliable and they're fucking flaky. And we know that about them. We know that about them. So it's important for you to investigate on your own, maybe, or just believe that coronavirus is airborne, that it is super dangerous, that being in inside places with many people is dangerous. Being in places with poor ventilation is dangerous. Anyway, I took the house. Just go ahead and stay home. It's okay. That one dude over there, fucking president of this raggedy-ass country, is threatening to withhold federal funding from schools if schools don't open. What we know is that simple things like lice and colds and, hand, foot, and mouth disease run rampant in schools because kids do not know how to social distance, because kids don't know how to keep their hands to themselves, and children need their entire bodies to learn. So he's willing to put your child's health on the line for schools to open. That is stupid and that is negligent, and that comes from someone who's never spent a single day in a public school, who probably, no, we won't do that today. Okay, guys. It is not safe. It is not safe for your kids. It is not safe. Stay your ass at home if you can. And remember that the effects of COVID, should you get it, will wreak havoc on your body for a very long time. Very long time. It's, new disease. We're still trying to figure it out. Scientists are still trying to figure it out. But people who have contracted COVID-19 and then cleared, their bodies are still in shambles. So it's still a real thing. Wear your mask, wash your hands, take your vitamins, stay at home if you can.
And like Demetria said, if you are a person who needs a mask in New Mexico, hit us up. Email us at aprepnewmexico@gmail.com. Call us or text us 505-295-0008. If you need a mask, we'll bring one to your motherfucking house. And also shout out to our comrades at Pueblo Action Alliance, who are the reason why we have over 1,000 masks to give out to our community. Like if you came to Juneteenth and you got a mask from the APRP, that mask Pueblo Action Alliance gave to us. So please, if you need a mask and you have no way to buy one, contact us, email us, or call us, and we will bring one to you. So that has been COVID-19 updates. And next we want to talk about what is going on with Africa and the African diaspora when it comes to this raggedy-ass pandemic. Obviously, we are speaking to y'all from the belly of the beast, from the heart of the so-called richest and greatest nation on earth that is on every single level, drastically mismanaging this pandemic, just like letting people die and then saying we're going to open up the economy. So that's what's happening where we are, and also in the continent. Right now, so at the beginning stages of the virus or the pandemic, the virus spread very slowly across the African continent, and so we were like, wait, are we immune? But no, we're not. What actually had happened was that the virus was initially spread by like jet-setting ass people who could afford to travel from like China to London or Italy to New York and like fucking boop that shit wherever they left. So for many, like the majority of African people on the continent, that kind of international travel is not a possibility. And so that's why the virus initially spread quite slowly, because international traffic is not a thing for the majority of people that live in Africa. Just like the majority of African people in the United States can't travel internationally. But, those expats, those jet setters, those like rich people that could afford to travel eventually did bring the virus into Africa, and community spread started shortly after that. And so now we're seeing more and more COVID-19 cases on the continent as it's being spread within the community, not just from folks that are traveling. So the most impacted countries in the continent right now, as of today, are Azania, which is the African people's name for South Africa, Egypt, and Nigeria. Nigeria is the most severely impacted country in West Africa. Nigeria is seeing, as we speak, 400 new cases per day and rising. The Nigerian government recently announced that all federally owned schools would not be reopened for this school year. Like, as we are in the United States having an extremely wild conversation about having in-person school in like a month, Nigeria is saying we cannot do that. We're not even going to try. We can't control this virus. So maybe we should take a note from that. But anywho, so all federally owned schools will remain closed as COVID-19 cases are spreading in Nigeria. Final year student exams have been canceled for the school year. The Minister of Education says we have no idea when schools in Nigeria are going to be able to be opened again because we just don't have enough information about this virus. But at the same time, because of the impact to capitalism, because of the impact on businesses, domestic flights are now resuming in Nigeria. So flights within Nigeria are resuming so that business people can travel. They are resuming with strict mask and physical distancing requirements, meaning that in order to even like get into the airport, you got to wear a mask, you got to maintain your 6 feet. They are doing temperature screenings. So every single person that is attempting to enter an airport or board a plane has to get their temperature taken. But as we have discussed many times on the show, people who show no symptoms, who do not have a fever, can have COVID-19 and give it to other people. So while wearing masks and engaging in social distancing and taking temperatures are all good steps, You could not make me go on a plane right now. I would not. No matter where I had to go, I would figure out a way to motherfucker drive or walk or ride a horse. But what you're not going to make me do is get in a motherfucking tin can in the sky with recycled air with any number of other people during a pandemic. Like, we're not going to do that. But because capitalism is so irrational, because there is like this constant push to like continue making money, to continue expanding economically, no matter who has to die, basically. Now we're doing extremely irrational things like opening domestic flights in Nigeria. So we will continue to follow the spread of the pandemic in that country on this show. Other things happening in Africa is that Ghana is the second most impacted country in West Africa from this pandemic after Nigeria. But because of that irrational capitalist profit motive that I just talked about, Ghana has still undertaken these reopening procedures to attempt to reopen the economy and make sure rich people can keep getting richer. And the impact has been, so they said social gatherings are allowed. People can attempt to vote in the 2020 elections. There's no kind of remote, no kind of planning for remote voting happening in Ghana, just like here. And so the consequence of that is that the education ministry in Ghana has reported that 90% of its staff has tested positive for COVID-19 after the education ministry implemented mass testing. So 90% of the employees of the Ministry of Education in Ghana have tested positive for COVID-19. And at the same time, the Ghana Education Service, which runs the public schools in Ghana, has said that the schools are gonna remain open. Has said that the final exams will continue. Has said the Ghanaian government has said we're gonna keep trying to open up the economy. And meanwhile, this one department in the government, the education ministry, 90% of the employees tested positive for COVID-19. So, capitalism is irrational as fuck. Capitalism is anti-African. Clearly, capitalism is like forcing governments to make decisions that on one side completely abandon their people during pandemics, and on the other side use them as guinea pigs to make sure that rich people can continue to generate income. So that's what we're seeing unfold in Ghana. Is an extremely irrational situation. This pandemic is clearly by no way, shape, or form under control, but there's still this immense pressure to keep children in schools and to keep opening up the economy even as the infection numbers rise. And then on a continental level, early reports, early studies have shown that at the end of this pandemic, an additional 15 million Africans could be pushed into extreme poverty owing to the pandemic itself, and also owing to the measures taken to attempt to control the pandemic. Restrictions imposed to prevent the spread of COVID-19 on the continent have caused food chain disruptions across nations in Africa, which again pose a dual threat of making existing poverty and hunger due to exploitation, due to underdevelopment, much, much worse, and have also directly threatened the income of millions of families across the continent, especially families in rural areas that depend on farming, subsistence farming, to, produce food to feed themselves and also to produce income. So there's like this ripple effect of drastic consequences of these lockdowns in Africa that the most vulnerable populations, like the poorest populations, particularly women, particularly rural communities, are going to feel the most acutely. And so we're going to continue to follow the story of worsening poverty in Africa due to this pandemic. And governments in Africa have a responsibility to begin to work together to address this on a continental level. That's why we always say one unified socialist Africa. Because Ghana trying to do one thing, Nigeria trying to do one thing, Azania trying to do another thing, and none of them working together, it's not working for Africa. It's not working for Africa. In order to address like the massive spread of poverty that's going to be induced by this pandemic, African nations have to work together on a continental level, to produce regional integration and cooperation across the agriculture industry for these rural communities, for these subsistence farmers. We need to start working together on a continental level, not just like a nation by nation basis, to address the problems that are being created by this pandemic. So we're going to continue giving y'all updates on these stories. And Demetria, any thoughts?
No, but we got 10 minutes, or 12 minutes, sorry.
I believe in you. Okay, so next part.
Do it.
We could do it. I believe
Mexico update. We told you. And this is not an I told you so moment. It's really not, but we did. We told y'all. We told you the eviction moratorium was a sham. We've been telling you the eviction moratorium is a sham. It's a sham. People are being thrown out into the street.
Yep.
It's July. We're still in the middle of a pandemic. But people are being forced into homelessness because capitalism is some bullshit. We told you from the jump. We need a rent freeze. We told you from the jump. Eviction moratoriums are not actually going to save anyone. Our comrade, Millions for Prisoners, Belinda, has unfortunately experienced this personally this week. So, we told y'all. We had a comrade in the AAPRP who also experienced this. And it's very expensive to be poor. It's very expensive to be poor in America because every punishment they give you is a financial punishment. They know you can't meet it, so then you're punished again. You end up having to go to court and you pay court costs, but if you're having a problem paying your rent, you can't fucking pay the court fees. Make it make sense. We've been telling you the eviction moratorium is a sham. It is. We need to organize a rent strike because we can't allow this to happen to our community. It's absolute nonsense.
Absolutely. So the same family, so our comrade from Millions for Prisoners, as Demetria just broke down, Slinda Guerrero, whose home host, Albuquerque Mutual Aid, which is a community project which has fed over 11,000 people in the city of Albuquerque. So this was running out of Slinda's home, a community project. Slinda was given, I believe, like 15 minutes notice to get the fuck out of her house, with several children in this entire community program functioning out of that address during a pandemic. So the eviction moratorium was allegedly supposed to be relief for folks that were going to be thrown out into the street because they couldn't pay, because they lost their jobs during this pandemic. But as we can clearly see, both in the case of the comrade who lives in New Mexico chapter, or who's in New Mexico chapter who had to deal with an eviction, and also in the case of Celinda, people are still being evicted, moratorium or not. So not only are they still being charged rent when they can't work because they lost their jobs, but they're also still facing eviction, still facing homelessness again during a pandemic. And then to the same family of our comrade Slinda Guerrero, of Millions for Prisoners, we are seeing not just repression from the state on like the housing side, but also repression from the state, and they straight up stole her partner. They arrested her partner, Clifton White, for the crime of organizing a Black Lives Matter protest. They said he violated his parole, and this man has been locked up since the beginning of June for nothing. This is a very, very clear case of a political prisoner, of an African man who was doing incredible community work in the city of Albuquerque, who was targeted for that work, arrested for that work, and who is currently being criminalized for that work while being locked up, while being denied access to an attorney, while being denied access to his family, again for the crime of organizing a peaceful Black Lives Matter protest. So the same family that's being evicted during a pandemic, despite the so-called eviction moratorium, has also experienced the loss of their father to the same state that's evicting them again during the pandemic, again during like the new height of the current iteration of the Black Lives Matter movement. So this is how the city of Albuquerque, built once again on stolen land, built against the will of the rightful owners of this land, the Tiwa people. This is how the city of Albuquerque, the illegal settler city of Albuquerque, deals with African people attempting to organize for social justice. They throw them out of their homes during a pandemic, and they lock them up and keep them away from their families and keep them away from any kind of defense during a pandemic. Salute to the city of Albuquerque for being utter trash. Straight garbage on stolen land.
Bastard.
Other things, like the city, the right-wing, political infrastructure of the city just like continues with the hits. This past Sunday, so the Albuquerque Journal is basically like a right-wing, like if you live in New York, it's like the New York Daily News. If you live in Boston, it's like the Boston Herald. But the Albuquerque Journal is like a right-wing, like major newspaper. And so on the Sunday edition of their paper, which is the most read edition of the Albuquerque Journal, they had a front page story on the New Mexico Civil Guard. Who is the New Mexico Civil Guard? Well, the New Mexico Civil Guard is an armed militia of European men who in their free time put on military fatigues and pick up shotguns and assault rifles and go to Black Lives Matter protests and threaten people. So the Albuquerque Journal, which is again a major newspaper in this city, had a front page feature on this organization of armed European men who in their free time threatened Black Lives Matter protesters, and it was basically like a full recruitment ad. It was like a full-on recruitment ad for the New Mexico Civil Guard, where instead of being like, hey y'all, why do you keep going to Black Lives Matter protests and like threatening kids with weapons? They're like, are you just trying to protect the city? Can y'all tell us about your hobbies? Can y'all tell us about how you organize? Like, they were literally like the leader of the New Mexico Civil Guard is literally a white nationalist. The man has a swastika tattooed on his body. The man is a fucking Civil War reenactor. Like, he is an open white nationalist who started this organization, which is, again, European men putting on fatigues in their free time and picking up weapons and threatening Black Lives Matter protesters. The fucking Albuquerque Journal put them on the cover and basically acted like they were just folks, like, trying to help their community. And they were like, how do people get involved? What are y'all trying to do? We're not going to criticize you in any way. We're just going to give you a platform. So, yeah. We just wanted to give a shout out to the Albuquerque Journal for helping a literal white nationalist organization that is threatening African indigenous people on this land recruit more people to do that. Why the fuck would y'all do that? Holy shit. Like, that is bananas, and it shows you precisely what we're dealing with. The politics that are like developed in a place like the United States. The politics that are developed under settler colonialism and capitalism, like, they are backwards as fuck. It's like insane. Anywho, not insane, because it's not bad to be insane. What is it? It is reactionary as fuck. It is gonna get people killed. How about that? It's not insane because it's not bad to be mentally ill. It is going to get people killed, and that is bad.
Yep. Hit up the Albuquerque Journal, ask them what the fuck they were thinking.
Send them a letter to the editor and be like, why are you recruiting for a white nationalist organization?
This is a bad look, guys. Folks. Alright, let's make this quick. Michelle Lujan Grisham is having a press conference at 4 o'clock today. 8? Today's the 8th, right? No, the 9th. Today is the 9th. At 4 o'clock today because, hello New Mexico. We're not as bad as other states, but we're still out of control. All our numbers do is climb. So we have the highest number, which was 290 yesterday, of new COVID cases. The only thing that has changed is the date and the increase in numbers. It is not safe. So if you want to hear what the governor has to say about anything regarding COVID, that's going to happen this afternoon. A few weeks ago, I incorrectly said the zoo was open. I was wrong. The botanical garden is open, the aquarium, the zoo, all indoor things are still closed. School entry, APS, high. So, the reentry plans from principals are due on the 15th. Email your principal and see if they're ready. They're back on contract. Ask them if they're ready. Ask them what they're going to do. Master timings are going to be a thing, but let's remember, most teachers who've been teaching for any period of time are significantly older. Teachers with families, because let's remember, teachers have families, educational assistants have families, secretaries, we have families. And so master timers are going to be a thing. You can't run a school with a skeleton crew. I don't care what anybody tells you. It's not possible. High school sports. High school sports were allowed to resume on the 29th of June. We don't have a lot of time, but we'll talk next week about how really fucking stupid that is, and it's neglectful, and it's absurd. But if you have a high school student, they are going to be practicing and conditioning, even though it is not clear that they are even going to be able to play for the fall. But that is the thing, you need to be careful. If you said, fuck indoor school, E-Academy is going to be a thing for K through 8, not just for high schoolers anymore. So you can have a school fully online for your kids. We'll put the link in the comments in case you're interested. Make sure you fill out, if you're on the APS website, aps.edu, fill out the free and reduced lunch form. If you did not get free reduced lunch for your students before, and you now qualify because pandemic, you may qualify for the PEBT, which is the pandemic EBT, which would give you, I think, $5 and change for every meal that your student missed from the shutdown until June. So that's something to think about, excuse me. Remember, going into schools, there's so many things to think of. Is your kid gonna, if you have a little, is that kid gonna be able to wear their mask all day? How are meals going to be handled? And kids need their entire body to learn. They need their entire body. And can this really be facilitated if schools fully open? It's a bad look. We don't love it. If you still need meals are still being handed out in the parks by the county and the city until August 5th, I believe, for kids ages 1 to 18. Show up at the park, wear your mask, you will get a mask, you will get a meal for every kid in your crew. That's still a thing. Mind if I go through this?
Go for it.
So, you have to go participate in capitalism. Local organizing. Business organization. You just should. Because you know what? Can you see it? Can you see it? Organization drives everything.
Yes.
Okay? So get your eyes on organization somewhere. There are plenty. Hit us up. We will tell you of them, okay? Get in an organization. If you are an African person in the city of Albuquerque or nearby, Railroad Show will take y'all too. It's a little racist up there. Join the AAPRP. We need you. We need you. We need you. We need you. Join us. We're great. We're amazing.
We're awesome.
Okay? If you don't maybe necessarily feel like you are in a position to join, we still need your physical labor. Come help us make care packages, deliver to our elders. There's work for you. Come on. We're cool. If you need something, ask it. If you need something, say something. If you need something, say something so that your needs can be met. AAPRPNewMexico@gmail.com. If you would just like to donate cash, we would love to take it because we're trying to do really super great things for our community. We do have Venmo. We also do have PayPal. We will put those things in the comments. Albuquerque Mutual Aid is still making it. They're doing stuff. They're showing up for the community regularly. If you need something, hit up Albuquerque Mutual Aid. With the fightforOurLives.org/mutual aid. Sam shows up for our kids so regularly. Sam does their sing-along and story time on Sundays at 3 p.m. Sam's amazing, and we love them, and we appreciate all the work that they do. The John Brown Breakfast Club still handing out burritos and meals every Saturday morning at 9 at First and Silver. John Brown, also another group we just love and appreciate because they show up for the community so regularly and so strong, and we appreciate that. Let's see here, what else we got? Pan Film Series is Saturday, The Scoop is Out by the Door. That is a fantastic film. I love it. Saturday, it will be on Facebook. It will be a Facebook event. You don't have to go nowhere. Right here, we got you. Saturday, the 11th at 2 p.m., The Scoop is Out by the Door. Our comrade Jamu out in California does a show on Sundays at 5 p.m. New Mexico time, 4 p.m. California time. Again, happening on Facebook. You don't have to go nowhere. Come get this knowledge. We have it. We want to give it to you. We love to share. It's our favorite. All right. So, who are we? We're the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. We're Pan-African Socialists. We're ready to get stuff popping. We do this because we need to be accountable and hold each other, keep each other safe, help each other out, do the best we can for ourselves. Because when Africa is free, Africans everywhere will be free. Okay? And again, organization decides everything. Get yourself in the organization. Get ready for revolution. We stay ready for revolution. Because when you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. Okay? Be safe. Wash your hands. Wear your mask. Bye.
Bye. That was dope. You just did that in fucking 10 minutes. Thank y'all. Thanks for watching. See you next week.